Some stories are never finished. They're just filed away. Welcome to Chronicles of the Obscure. July 14th, 1518. Strasbourg, a city in the Holy Roman Empire, simmers under the oppressive heat of midsummer. But the heat isn't the only thing causing tension. The preceding years have been brutal. A string of failed harvests has brought widespread famine, pushing the poor to the brink of starvation. A terrifying new disease, syphilis, haunts the public imagination, seen as a divine punishment for a sinful world. The air is thick with desperation, poverty, and a pervasive, simmering dread. On this day, on a narrow cobblestone street, a respectable housewife named Frau Trophia steps out of her home. And then, without a word, she begins to dance. This isn't a joyful jig or a celebratory waltz. It's a frantic, jerking, relentless movement. Her arms flail, her legs kick, her body contorts in a spasm of motion she cannot control. For hours she dances under the summer sun, her face a mask of agony. Her husband and concerned neighbors try to intervene, to restrain her, but she fights them off with unnatural strength, her eyes wide with a terror she cannot articulate. She dances through the stifling heat of the day, through the cool of the night, and into the pale light of the next morning, her body slick with sweat, her feet bleeding on the stones. This was not a performance, it was a compulsion, and terrifyingly, it was contagious. Within a week, 34 others had joined her macabre dance. Within a month, the Chronicles report as many as 400 people dancing in the streets of Strasbourg. They danced until they collapsed from exhaustion, until their bones broke, until their hearts gave out. This is the true story of the dancing plague of 1518, a documented historical event that reads like a medieval horror story, and a medical mystery that, even today, challenges our understanding of the mind, the body, and the terrifying power of the crowd. Let's open the historical dossier and examine the evidence. This isn't folklore. It's a well-documented catastrophe. Our primary sources are multiple and independent. We have the official minutes from the Strasbourg City Council, which meticulously recorded their panicked response. We have the notes of the famous and controversial physician Paracelsus, who visited Strasbourg years later specifically to investigate this bizarre event. And we have the written accounts of contemporary chroniclers like Sebastian Brandt, who captured the horror of the scene. The timeline is clear. The plague began with Frau Trophia in mid-July 1518 and peaked in intensity throughout the blistering month of August. The dancing was described not as something joyous, but as a furious dancing. Witnesses reported that the participants were screaming in pain, crying for help, and begging for a relief they could not find. Their bodies moved against their will, a relentless puppet show of human suffering. The city's official response, though well-intentioned, was catastrophic. The town's leading physicians, consulting with the city council, believed the dancers were suffering from an ailment of hot blood. Their medieval prescription was not rest, but more dancing. The idea was to let the fever burn itself out. So, the council ordered a public space, the grain market, to be cleared. They erected a large wooden stage in the center of the city. To encourage the non-stop movement, they hired professional musicians, pipers, and drummers to provide a constant, maddening beat. They even hired strong, healthy men to hold up the exhausted dancers, to keep their bodies moving when their own muscles had failed. Imagine the scene, a public square filled with hundreds of people, their bodies twitching and jerking uncontrollably, their faces etched with pain, all to the soundtrack of incessant drums and pipes. This forced dancing only intensified the mania, pushing more people into the hysterical state and accelerating the death toll. The official record, preserved in the city archives, grimly states that at the plague's peak, as many as 15 people per day were dying from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer physical exhaustion. So, what could possibly cause such a bizarre and deadly phenomenon? Let's turn to the theory board. For centuries, this event has baffled historians and scientists, leading to several compelling and competing explanations. Theory 1 is mass psychogenic illness, also known as MPI or social contagion. This is the leading modern explanation. Mass psychogenic illness is a phenomenon where extreme psychological distress in a group manifests as real physical symptoms, spreading rapidly from person to person without an organic cause. Strasbourg in 1518 was a perfect tinderbox for this. The population was under unimaginable stress. They were starving, impoverished, and steeped in a deep-seated religious superstition that interpreted every hardship as a sign of divine wrath or demonic influence. The frantic dancing could have been a collective, hysterical release of this unbearable anxiety, a physical manifestation of a city's psychological breakdown, triggered by the powerful public example of Frau Trophia. Theory 2 points to a biological culprit: ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, which was a staple grain in their diet. This fungus produces chemical compounds related to LSD. Ingesting it can cause a condition known as ergotism or St. Anthony's fire, which leads to muscle spasms, convulsions, hallucinations, and a burning sensation in the limbs. This could certainly explain the involuntary movements and delirious state of the dancers. However, there are problems with this theory. Classic ergotism also causes severe digestive issues and gangrene, where limbs turn black and fall off. The historical chronicles of the dancing plague don't emphasize these symptoms. Furthermore, a contaminated batch of grain would likely affect people in a specific area, but the dancing plague seemed to spread more like a social contagion, not a localized poisoning. Theory 3 suggests a religious or cult-like mania. In the medieval period, there were precedents for so-called dancing manias, often linked to Saint Vitus. According to belief, the saint could inflict a curse of compulsive dancing, and the afflicted believed they had to dance themselves to exhaustion to appease him. The dancers of 1518 may have entered a dissociative trance state, convinced they were cursed and that this purgative, frantic dance was their only path to salvation. It became a self-fulfilling and deadly prophecy. Finally, Theory 4, which is perhaps the most compelling, is that it wasn't one single cause, but a combination, a biopsychosocial perfect storm. Imagine a population already physically weakened by famine and malnutrition. That's the biological factor. This population is gripped by profound existential fear, religious anxiety, and daily desperation. That's the psychological factor. All of this is happening within a culture that truly believed in saints' curses and the possibility of being supernaturally compelled to dance. That's the social factor. In this volatile environment, a single trigger, perhaps a few initial cases of ergotism, or one person's public hysterical breakdown could have been the spark that ignited the entire city. The dancing plague isn't just a historical curiosity. It has modern echoes. It stands as the classic case study in medical textbooks on mass psychogenic illness. We see smaller-scale parallels today. Mysterious outbreaks of twitching, fainting spells, or nausea that sweep through schools or factories, for which doctors can find no toxicological or infectious cause. These events are often traced back to a shared, high-stress environment. The legacy of 1518 is its stark and terrifying demonstration of how powerfully the mind can command the body. It forces us to take psychosomatic illness seriously, not as someone faking it or making it up, but as a real, devastating, and physiological response to unbearable mental and emotional pressure. It reveals that the symptoms of our deepest anxieties can be written on the body itself. The mystery endures because we can't run a controlled experiment on history. We can only sift through the fragments left behind, trying to piece together the human experience from a distance of 500 years. The story of Strasbourg is a chilling reminder that our reality is shaped as much by our beliefs and fears as it is by the physical world around us. The dancing plague of 1518 is ultimately a mystery of human vulnerability. It shows us that the line between the mind and the body, between the individual and the crowd is far thinner and more porous than we'd like to believe. This wasn't a ghost story or a supernatural curse in the way they understood it. It was a social symptom, a physical scream from a community at its breaking point. The case file remains open because it asks a timeless question. Under enough pressure, what strange and terrifying shapes can human despair take? And are we, in our own modern, highly stressed world, truly immune to the contagion of the mind? Do you lean towards a psychological, biological, or cultural explanation for the plague? Let me know your interpretation in the comments below. Thanks for joining us in the archives. Subscribe to Chronicles of the Obscure for more stories that have been filed away but never forgotten.